Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 4 of The Chase, a podcast that discusses all things ballparks with a little baseball history mixed in and maybe some other ball talk. So today we're going to discuss what makes a ballpark great. Last month, you may have seen it, USA Today put out their list of the best MLB ballparks. I'll put the link in the comment section below, so if you want to dive into this a little bit deeper, we're not going to go through the full article. But that's not really the point of this podcast. I'm going to list the top 5 ballparks according to their list. But before I do, let's talk about the criteria that they based their list on. So a couple of the things they looked at were atmosphere, design, location, amenities, food, and character. So their top 5 ballparks, according to the USA Today's article, was number 5, Coors Field. Number 4 was Wrigley Field. Number 3, PNC Park. Number 2, Oracle Park. And number 1, Petco Park. Now, at the time of this podcast, I've been to 3 of the 5, seen games at 3 of the 5, and that's Wrigley, PNC Park, and Coors Field. I did take a tour of Oracle Park back in February, so I really can't gauge an opinion on that until I see a game, and hopefully that's coming up this summer. But I'm not going to rank all of my ballparks that I've been to. That's kind of, again, not the point of this. We're kind of just looking at what, to us, makes a ballpark special. So anytime we discuss anything with a ranking system, it's very subjective, right? A ballpark that someone thinks lacks character, I may feel that ballpark has a lot of character. It's solely opinion-based. A ballpark that may be ranked high solely on the ballpark itself may be ranked low if you take into consideration other variables, like what's around the ballpark to do pregame, postgame, stuff like that. And we're going to get into a lot more of that. So when you travel to a new ballpark, what criteria do you use to describe how great a ballpark is, or how not great it is? So for me, most of the criteria that the USA Today article listed, I use as well, but there are a couple other factors that I take into consideration when I'm either ranking a ballpark or, trying to decide if I would return to that ballpark at a later date. So let's break it down a little bit further. So the first one we talked about was atmosphere. So when I think of atmosphere, that involves a handful of things. I think of the fans. How energetic are they? Are they loud? Are they quiet? If there's not much going on during the game, maybe their team's losing, how energetic is the crowd? Is there that buzz that you get sometimes? Even when the game's slow, there's just that energy, that buzz that a lot of fans will put off. So that's part of the atmosphere. The entertainment between innings or between batters, that's put on by the ballpark staff themselves, how much of that is, at a particular ballpark. Fan engagement from a ballpark standpoint. So a lot of times you'll see between innings, they'll do different giveaways, trivia, stuff like that. Some ballparks do a better job than that than others. How energetic is the PA announcer? That one sounds kind of lame, but I've been to ballparks where whoever the PA announcer is, they're monotone. There's not a lot of life to to their voice, and they almost sound bored. Then other ballparks, they're just enthusiastic and they're excited, whether it's the home team or the away team. So to me, that's all part of the atmosphere. And then for atmosphere, I also take into consideration the neighborhood, what's around the ballpark to do pregame, postgame. So all of that is kind of how I describe atmosphere. Looking at design, so this one isn't a huge factor for me. Don't get me wrong, I'll take an open air ballpark any day over a dome stadium. I feel design and character in some aspects go hand in hand. How cold or warm does the ballpark feel? And there's different factors that play into that. The outside architecture. Does it look like a ballpark from the outside? A lot of these domes nowadays, as you're approaching it, it almost just looks like a giant building in the city or a warehouse. So does the outside of the ballpark have that character, that charm, that you're walking up to a ballpark? And again, that can all fall under that cold or warm feeling you get with a ballpark, right? I hear a lot of people describe some of the dome stadiums or dome ballparks as just cold warehouse, sterile feel inside, and that they're not necessarily wrong in a lot of cases. Location. So this one's pretty important to me. There needs to be entertainment around the ballpark, and what I mean by that, sports bars, restaurants, activities for families. Is the neighborhood around the ballpark walkable? Can I walk around the entire ballpark, check everything out, and easily get to these places? So it's no secret, I'm a Mets fan. I've said this in multiple podcasts and multiple videos on my social networking sites. I've said I'm a lifelong Mets fan, so I go to Citi Field quite often. But I'll admit, Citi Field, as it currently sits, is probably one of the worst ballparks when it comes to this criteria about entertainment and stuff to do around the ballpark. Now, you may have heard that recently the Mets owner, Steve Cohen, got approved to build a massive entertainment complex, including a hotel, a casino, just all kinds of different entertainment venues around Citi Field. But it's going to be a little while, even though they started breaking ground this year. But right now, you go to Citi Field, and then you want to go do something after the game, you either have to go take a train a little bit further into Queens or go to a different part of the city. So it doesn't rank real high on my list when it comes to location. Now, probably the best ballpark when it comes to location for me, definitely Wrigley Field and the whole Wrigleyville area. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know the exact number. I took a ballpark tour, and the tour guy said something like there were 40-some bars within a 2-mile radius of Wrigley Field. From locals, they tend to feel there's a lot more. But my point is, there's a lot to do around Wrigley Field. Family-friendly stuff as well. There's some cool bars that just offer cool things like Sluggers. If you go upstairs to Sluggers in Wrigleyville, they got batting cages. So just a lot of cool stuff going on around Wrigleyville area. So the next criterion we're going to look at is amenities. I feel like most ballparks kind of share many of the same amenities, and it seems like once a ballpark comes up with a new idea or a new amenity, all the other ballparks are quick to take note and integrate that into their ballpark. So I keep fans coming back, right? I understand that. But for me, probably the biggest amenity that I look for, and maybe this really isn't the right category, it may fall more under character, but when I go to a ballpark, I want to see it representing the team's history, the neighborhood, stuff like that, just like the culture. And this can be done through murals, statues, plaques, museums, stuff like that. I'll tell you, if a ballpark has a pretty nice museum inside, it automatically ranks higher on my list than ballparks that don't. Now, when I say museums, I don't necessarily mean like a brick and mortar museum. Like if you've ever been to Cincinnati and seen their Hall of Fame and their museum, it's pretty impressive. It could be something totally different. Take Progressive Field, for instance. Out in center field, they have Heritage Park. So it's an open air area that commemorates the team's Hall of Famers, whether that player is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame or the Team Hall of Fame. There's also an area for players, staff, and even fans who made an impact on the team. That's kind of what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this specific amenity. Now, food's a big one. As you've probably heard me say many times, food's probably one of the biggest attractions for me to a ballpark. And I've said before, when I go to these ballparks, I won't eat your typical ballpark food, nachos, chicken strips, burgers, stuff like that. I am always looking for the local food of either what the ballpark's known for, what the city's known for, something like that. So that's a big factor for me. Going back to the whole Citi Field example, this is one area where I think it probably outranks most ballparks. As a matter of fact, it's been ranked number one the last 4 years as best ballpark food in all of Major League Baseball. And I think the reason for that is they do a great job of tying in the community into that. And what do I mean by that? Queens is probably one of the most diverse communities in the whole country. and it's well represented in the food selections at City Park or City Field. So you could truly get food from all over the world at City Field, and it's fantastic. So for me, that's definitely number one of the ballparks I've been to when it comes to food is City Field. So talking about character, like I said, I feel this kind of coincides with the design criteria. I'm a big sucker when it comes to brick, even in my own home. I just think it's cozy and welcoming. And that was one of the things that I fell in love with at Wrigley Field was just the concourses are all brick. And it's just that warm and cozy feeling. So that kind of does it for me. Obviously, if we were to rank ballparks by the individual criterion that we were just talking about, I really feel that each list would be different, right? So a ballpark that may rank high in atmosphere may not rank as high in food or design. But a ballpark that has amazing food selection may not have much around it, so it may not rank high on the list for location. So looking at these categories, solely based on the ballparks that I have visited, no one ballpark really ranks number one in all those criteria. If I would make a list of those criteria and rank my ballparks, probably there would be a different number one on almost every list. However, certain criteria do outrank others in my book. I did mention food. But here's the thing. There's one criterion that is the true defining factor in whether I return to a ballpark. It's not on the list, but it's definitely the number one motivator for me to not only rank a ballpark high, but makes me want to come back on a regular basis. And that's the feeling that the ballpark gives you. And I'm not talking about atmosphere like we talked about. There's just a feeling that I get that certain ballparks have given me that, like, once you leave that ballpark, you seriously miss it and you want to go back and you can't wait to go back. I really can't describe this feeling. And like I said, only a couple of ballparks have ever made me feel this way. But it's almost like a connection or a bond. I know this sounds really cheesy, but it's similar to like meeting somebody that you just hit it off with right away and you build that instant connection and you guys are like lifelong friends. It's kind of like that. Like I said, sounds cheesy, but you know, that's why they say baseball is romantic, right? And the funny thing is I don't get this feeling at other sports venues or entertainment complexes. There's just been a couple baseball parks that have done it for me. And so as I continue my chase over the next few years and I strive to visit all the ballparks, I have a very short list of ballparks that I plan on visiting at least once a year of the ones that I've already visited. And these ballparks rank high in most categories that we talked about. I think that is one of the most exciting parts about being a ballpark chaser is that unknown. Each time we visit a new ballpark, what are we going to experience? What are we going to feel? Will this be the ballpark that we get that feeling I'm talking about that keeps us wanting to come back year after year? Thanks to social media, we have a pretty good idea going into these ballparks what to expect, right? These Facebook groups are great asking questions and getting information. But again, it's subjective. And that's why I walk into each ballpark with an open mind. Again, I'm not going to discuss each ballpark that I visited based on its criteria. It'll be way too long of a podcast. But I want to mention a few that's kind of stood out to me through my chase. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Lone Depot Park. That's definitely one of the most disliked and lowest ranked ballparks by chaser standards from what I hear. I'll tell you one thing that stood out to me. I went to 2 games, middle of the week, and the atmosphere was actually really, really great. Even though there were less than 8,000 fans at each game, anytime the Marlins did something really good on the field, those fans were loud. I mean, very loud. It almost didn't feel like there were only, 8,000 fans in the ballpark. But another factor there was the atmosphere around the ballpark was great. The entertainment between innings, the PA announcer, the Latin flair, it almost made the ballpark feel fuller than it really was. So even though there's kind of that cold, sterile feeling of it being a dome stadium, and it was closed when I was there, and small crowd, I actually really enjoyed my visit there. Next ballpark I'm going to talk about is Progressive Field. So I visited Progressive for the first time last July. I went there for a weekend series to record content for my YouTube channel. From what I'd read, Progressive Field was always kind of middle of the road when it came to rankings. I was excited to visit. One of the main reasons, my wife's family is from the Northeast Ohio area. A lot of family members are Guardians fans, so I was kind of excited to get up there. After my weekend visit, I was hooked. I'll be honest with you. I've said to many people, I feel Progressive Field is one of the most underrated ballparks in MLB. They have a great variety of food, just more than I was expecting when I got there, and the food that they do have is top notch. Really, really good food. The fans were passionate and energetic. The just around the ballpark, the entertainment was fantastic, and just the way the ballpark's laid out, there's not a bad seat in the house, whether you're standing room only or you have a seat somewhere. I've sat pretty much all around that ballpark, and every seat is a good view. One thing that is different about Progressive of the ballparks I've been to is how much standing room only areas there are. More so than any other ballpark. And they sell what's called a district ticket, to where standing room only, you get $10 loaded onto your ticket, which gets you a free drink. So it's a pretty cool experience. And the good thing is, it's a short drive for me, relatively short. I could do it in a day, round trip. And the other big thing that Progressive Field ranks high in my book for is, we talked about representing your culture, your history, your neighborhoods. They do a great job of that. I mentioned Heritage Park, but also a lot of murals and statues just representing their past and their history. So Progressive Field does a good job with that. Last ballpark I want to talk about is Wrigley Field. As I mentioned, I did a recent trip there a couple weeks ago. Spent two days, went to 2 games. Spent a lot of time walking around the Wrigleyville neighborhood, and I'll be honest, that trip changed my life. Again, I know it sounds cheesy, but there have been 2 times in my life when a ballpark has truly made a lasting impression on me. First one was the Mets home opener in 2025, and that was because that was my first trip to Citi Field. It had been a dream of mine since Citi Field opened up. I went to 1 game at Shea when I was a kid, never made it back. So that was number 1. And the second time was obviously my trip to Wrigley. Yes, the ballpark's old, and there isn't a whole lot of selection when it comes to food. But walking into just the nostalgia of that ballpark, walking in, I took a ballpark tour and hearing the history, more so than I even knew about the team and about the ballpark. And the fact that it's been the number 1 bucket list ballpark for me since I was a kid, comboed with, the tour, to where we got to see the most iconic parts of the ballpark. We got to sit in the bleachers. We got to walk out on the field, at least around the warning track. You got to see the iconic clock and the manual scoreboard, the brick walls throughout the concourse, and, of course, the brick wall, outfield wall. And even though I was there in April and the ivy wasn't, fully in bloom, there were still patches of it coming in. So kind of got the feel for it. And the neighborhood around the ballpark, I mentioned it before, it's electric. It's just, there's an energy that I have never felt anywhere else at a sporting event or a venue. That feeling that I mentioned earlier, that indescribable feeling, like, I got that. And Wrigley Field is definitely now on my list of ballparks that I'm going to return to on a regular basis, at least once a year, if not more. And I went there with certain expectations because, again, we read social media. We hear people, tell their stories of these ballpark visits and just what you see on TV. So, I had my certain expectations, and they were pretty high. And Wrigley not only hit those expectations, but they significantly exceeded those expectations. So, as hyped as I was about my visit there, I never expected to leave there, though, knowing that I would be making an annual trip to Wrigley. I thought I would go and it'd be like, oh, this was awesome, knock a bucket list item off my list. But yeah, it's going to be a frequent flyer return trip for me. So you've heard from me, so now I want to hear from you. Comment below and just tell me what criteria you look for in a ballpark that makes a ballpark rank high on your list, or that makes you want to keep coming back year after year if it's not your home ballpark. Also, if there's a ballpark that surprised you after visiting, you went there just because it was on your list, you wanted to knock another one off your visit list, and you left there thinking, this place was pretty cool. You were really, really surprised about what all it offered. Tell me about it. Comment below and let me know. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please give it a like and click that subscribe button. That'll continue to help me bring you these podcasts and the videos that I put out on my YouTube channel. And if you guys ever have ideas for videos or podcasts, comment below and let me know. So have a great day and happy chasing.